The morning breeze swept through Willow Creek Elementary, carrying the sharp, salty scent of the sea that clung to the small coastal town, where grey winter skies cast a somber veil over the weathered clapboard buildings. Clara Thompson, a third-grade teacher with 20 years of experience, moved through her classroom with quiet purpose, arranging books, pencils, and construction paper with a practiced hand, her hazel eyes catching the faint shimmer of waves. Beyond the fogged windows, her colleagues often spoke of her uncanny ability to sense a child's unspoken troubles, a gift honed over decades of teaching, one that stirred now as she prepared for the day. The classroom, cozy but worn, held mismatched desks and faded posters, reflecting the town's modest circumstances. Yet Clara's warmth filled the space with a sense of safety. 10 minutes before the bell, the door creaked open, and a small figure hesitated in the threshold, drawing Clara's attention. Sophie Miller, a new student, stood there, her slight frame leaning heavily on a worn leg brace that creaked faintly with each careful step, her dark hair tied back with a frayed ribbon, and her faded green sweater hanging loosely over a skirt patched at the hem. Despite the morning's chill, she wore no coat, only thin sneakers, their edges damp from the mist that clung to the town's streets. Clara approached with a gentle smile, kneeling slightly to meet Sophie's guarded hazel eyes, which seemed to carry a weight far beyond her 7 years. "Good morning, you must be Sophie. I'm Miss Thompson, your teacher." Sophie nodded, her voice soft but steady. "Sophie Miller. Today's my first day." There was a quiet resolve in her posture, her chin tilted upward despite the visible effort of balancing on her brace, and Clara sensed a depth in her gaze, a wisdom that hinted at experiences no child should carry. She gestured to the desks, each adorned with a colourful name tag crafted the night before. "Pick any seat you like, Sophie." The girl scanned the room with careful deliberation, her eyes lingering on the window where the ocean stretched toward the horizon, before choosing a desk tucked near the back, close enough to see the waves but far from the front where attention might linger too long. As the other students trickled in, their chatter and laughter filling the air with energy, Sophie remained silent, her hands folded neatly, responding politely when spoken to, but offering nothing more. During the morning's writing activity, where Clara asked the class to describe their favorite place, Sophie scribbled slowly, her pencil moving with deliberate care, her brace clicking softly as she shifted in her seat. Clara circled the room, offering gentle encouragement, pausing to comment on a student's description of a treehouse or a beach picnic. But when she reached Sophie's desk, she stopped short. The girl had drawn a small house perched on a rocky cliff, its windows dark and shuttered, with a single stick figure standing far off on a boat, drifting toward the grey horizon. The scene rendered with a precision that spoke of quiet observation. The loneliness in the drawing was palpable, the house isolated against the vast sea, the figure on the boat almost out of reach. "That's a beautiful drawing, Sophie," Clara said softly, her voice careful not to press too hard. Sophie's fingers tightened around her pencil, her eyes flicking up with a sudden intensity that caught Clara off guard. "Miss Thompson," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the classroom, "do all dads leave for a long time?" The question landed like a stone in still water, simple yet heavy with unspoken pain, its weight settling in Clara's chest. Before she could respond, Sophie's gaze dropped back to her paper, her expression closing off as if she regretted letting the words escape, her small hand shading the drawing from view. Clara's heart tightened, her teacher's instincts screaming that this child carried a burden far too heavy for her small shoulders, a story hidden behind those guarded eyes. As the morning unfolded, Sophie participated quietly, her handwriting neat and precise, her answers to questions thoughtful but brief, yet her eyes often drifted to the window, searching the grey horizon as if expecting something or someone to appear. At snack time, she unwrapped a single slice of bread from wax paper, eating half with careful bites before folding the rest away with a reverence that suggested scarcity. Clara watched from her desk, noting the way Sophie's brace dug into her leg, the faint wince she hid with every shift in her seat, the way she adjusted the strap with a practiced motion that spoke of routine struggle. During a math lesson, Sophie solved problems with surprising speed, her pencil flying across the page, but when Clara praised her, she offered only a small nod, her face guarded. At recess, while other children raced to the playground, their shouts echoing through the salty air, Sophie lingered at her desk, adjusting her brace and watching the ocean through the window. Clara approached, offering to walk with her outside, but Sophie shook her head. "I like it here, it's quiet." The words were polite but final, and Clara respected her space, though her concern deepened. By the time the bell rang for lunch, Sophie gathered her things with deliberate care, slipping the wax paper with her half-eaten bread into a worn backpack. As she made her way to the door, her brace clicking softly, Clara noticed her pause to glance at the class bulletin board, where a calendar marked upcoming events, a talent show, a parent night, her eyes lingering as if searching for something. Missing. Clara knew this moment, this question, do all dads leave for a long time, would linger long after the school day ended, urging her to uncover the story behind Sophie's quiet strength, the weight of absence she carried in her small frame. It was a question that demanded answers, not just for Sophie's sake, but for the part of Clara that couldn't ignore a child's unspoken cry for understanding. Clara Thompson couldn't shake Sophie Miller's question as she locked her classroom. At Willow Creek Elementary, the salty evening air curling through the coastal town's quiet streets. The next day, Sophie arrived early again, her leg brace creaking as she settled at her desk by the window, her faded green sweater now paired with a slightly too large scarf that fluttered when she moved. Clara observed her closely during morning lessons, noting how Sophie's eyes drooped during silent reading, her head nodding before she'd jolt awake, blinking rapidly to refocus. During a spelling quiz, Sophie's pencil moved with precision, but her free hand fidgeted with the scarf, twisting it as if anchoring herself to the present. At lunch, she unwrapped her usual wax paper parcel, a single boiled egg and a corner of bread, eating methodically before tucking the remnants away. Clara's concern grew when she noticed Sophie wince as she adjusted her brace, the metal digging into her thin leg, yet the girl never complained, her silence a shield. During a group activity, Clara paired Sophie with Emma Carter, a cheerful girl with braided hair hoping to draw her out. Emma chattered about her pet goldfish, but Sophie only nodded, her gaze drifting to her notebook where she sketched a lone seagull circling above a turbulent sea. The drawing's stark loneliness tugged at Clara, prompting her to linger near Sophie's desk. "That's a striking seagull," Clara said gently. Sophie's fingers paused, then she added a tiny speck on the horizon. A boat, perhaps, before closing the notebook without a word. Later, during a science lesson about tides, Sophie answered a question about wave patterns with surprising insight, her voice soft but clear, earning a smile from Emma, who whispered, "You're really smart." Sophie's lips twitched, almost a smile, but she quickly looked down as if unaccustomed to praise. After school, Clara visited the office to check Sophie's records, her unease growing. The file was thin, listing only an address on Seaview Lane, a remote road far from town, and Margaret Miller as the emergency contact, with no mention of a father or mother. A call to the listed number went unanswered, the line crackling before, cutting off. Clara asked the secretary, Ms. Norris, about Sophie's previous school. "Came from Bayside Elementary, about 30 miles up the coast," Ms. Norris said, squinting at her computer. "No detailed notes, just a transfer form. Seems they moved suddenly." Clara's mind raced. Why the sudden move, and why was Sophie's file so sparse? The next day, Sophie's lunch was even smaller, just a handful of crackers, and she fell asleep during a quiet writing session, her head resting on her folded arms. Clara gently woke her, noting the faint circles under her eyes. "Are you feeling okay, Sophie?" she asked. Sophie nodded, rubbing her eyes. "Just tired. I walked to the bus stop early." Clara's heart sank. How far was this walk, and alone with that brace? During art, Clara introduced a project to draw a place where they felt safe. Sophie's paper showed the same cliffside house, now with a cracked roof and a single light glowing inside, a distant boat barely visible in the waves. Clara knelt beside her. "This house looks special. Who's in it?" Sophie hesitated, then whispered, "Just me and Grandma Margaret. It's where we stay." The simplicity of stay rather than live struck Clara, hinting at impermanence. That afternoon, Clara confided in Miss Harper, a fellow teacher with a no-nonsense demeanor. "Sophie's walking a long way to a bus stop, eating next to nothing and sleeping in class. Something's not right." Miss Harper frowned. "We need more than a hunch, Clara. Kids can be tired or shy for lots of reasons. Have you asked her?" "Directly," Clara shook her head. "She's so guarded, I don't want to push her away." Miss Harper suggested checking with the bus driver, so Clara tracked down Mr. Evans, who drove the Seaview Lane route. "Little girl with a brace?" "Yeah, she gets on at the far stop, about a mile out. Always alone, rain or shine," he said, scratching his head. "Takes the bus to the edge of town, then walks who knows where." Clara's stomach twisted. A mile on that brace in this weather. That evening, she drove to Seaview Lane, a narrow road flanked by dunes and scraggly pines, the ocean's roar a constant backdrop. The address from Sophie's file led to a boarded-up shack, clearly abandoned with no sign of life. Clara's unease deepened. The address was false, and Sophie was out there somewhere, carrying her quiet burdens alone. The next morning, Sophie arrived soaked from a sudden drizzle, her sneakers squelching as she settled at her desk. Clara offered her a spare towel from the supply closet, which Sophie accepted with a murmured, "Thank you." During a story-sharing activity, Clara handed out journals for the class to write about a time they felt brave. Sophie wrote slowly, her face pinched with concentration, and when Clara collected the journals, she noticed Sophie had left hers, open to a single line. "I was brave when I waited for the bus in the dark." The words, stark and raw, sent a chill through Clara. She decided to keep Sophie's journal private, sensing it held more than the girl was ready to share. At recess, Sophie stayed inside, sketching in her journal while other kids played. Clara sat nearby pretending to grade papers. "Sophie, how do you get to the bus stop?" she asked casually. Sophie's pencil stilled. "I walk from home, it's not too far." Her tone was practiced, deflecting further questions. Clara didn't press, but the image of Sophie navigating a dark, windy road alone haunted her. By week's end, Clara noticed Sophie's scarf was gone, replaced by a thinner one, and her brace seemed looser, rubbing red marks into her skin. During a math game, Sophie partnered with Emma, who giggled and shared her eraser. But Sophie's smile was fleeting, her eyes darting to the window as if expecting something. Clara's resolve hardened. She needed to know more about Sophie's life, not just for curiosity, but to ensure the girl was safe. That night, unable to sleep, Clara stared at the ocean from her apartment window, the waves mirroring her restless thoughts. Sophie's question, her sparse meals, her solitary walks, all pointed to a life of quiet struggle, and Clara felt a growing urgency to uncover the truth before it slipped further out of reach. A fierce coastal storm rolled into Willow Creek, the wind howling and rain lashing against the windows of Clara Thompson's classroom at Willow Creek Elementary, transforming the playground into a sea of puddles. Sophie Miller was absent that morning, her desk by the window starkly empty, the first time she'd missed class since arriving. Clara's worry, already simmering, spiked as she recalled Sophie's journal entry about waiting for the bus in the dark. During a break, she checked Sophie's desk, finding her journal tucked in the cubby, its cover worn from constant handling. Against her usual respect for student privacy, Clara opened it, her breath catching at a new drawing. Sophie standing alone at a windswept bus stop, her leg brace sketched with painful detail, rain pooling around her feet, captioned, "Waiting for the last bus again." The image, raw and vivid, confirmed Clara's fears. Sophie was out there, vulnerable in this storm. Unable to focus on lessons, Clara told Ms. Harper she was stepping out to check on a student, then grabbed her raincoat and drove the Seaview Lane bus route, the road slick and visibility near zero. At the farthest stop, a rickety shelter by a desolate stretch of dunes, she spotted a small figure huddled inside, unmistakable even through the rain-blurred windshield. Sophie, soaked to the bone, Her thin scarf plastered to her neck, gripped her brace as she shivered. Clara rushed out, umbrella useless against the wind. "Sophie, what are you doing here?" she called, her voice nearly lost in the gale. Sophie's eyes widened, surprise giving way to recognition. "The morning bus didn't come," she said matter-of-factly. "Sometimes it skips this stop in bad weather. I'm waiting for the afternoon one." Clara's heart sank. "You've been here all day?" Sophie nodded, her teeth chattering. "I'm okay, I'm used to waiting." The resignation in her voice, so calm for a 7-year-old, pierced Clara. Kneeling to her level, she said, "Let me take you home, Sophie. It's not safe out here." Sophie hesitated, her gaze flickering with distrust, then softened. "Okay, but don't tell anyone where we live. Grandma Margaret says it's private." Clara nodded, helping Sophie into her car, the girl's brace clanking against the seat. Sophie directed her down a winding path off Seaview Lane, where the dunes gave way to a cluster of salt-bleached pines. There, nestled against a rocky outcrop, stood a dilapidated cottage, its roof sagging and windows patched with plastic sheeting. Clara parked, her stomach twisting at the sight. No electricity. No warmth in this storm. Inside, Margaret Miller, a frail woman with silver hair and deep-set eyes, greeted them with a mix of warmth and wariness, leaning on a cane. The cottage was sparse, a single room with a wood stove, a rickety table, and 2 narrow cots. Margaret offered Clara a chipped mug of weak tea, her hands trembling slightly. "Thank you for bringing her home," she said, her voice steady despite her fragile appearance. "The storm caught us off guard." Clara chose her words carefully. "Mrs. Miller, I was worried when Sophie didn't show up. She mentioned taking a long walk to the bus stop." Margaret's eyes flickered to Sophie, who was drying her scarf by the stove. "We manage," she said softly. "It's just us now. Her father, Daniel, he's been gone months working on fishing boats. Sends money when he can, but it's not steady." Clara noted the exhaustion in Margaret's voice, the weight of raising Sophie alone. Sophie, sitting quietly, adjusted, her brace wincing as it rubbed her skin raw. "Does Sophie's brace need adjusting?" Clara asked gently. Margaret sighed. "It's old. Doctors said she needs a new one, maybe surgery, but we can't afford it yet. Daniel promised to save." But—" she trailed off, her eyes distant. Clara's concern deepened. This wasn't just poverty. It was a child bearing adult burdens. Back at school the next day, Sophie returned, her clothes damp but clean, her face pale but composed. Clara confided in the school counselor, Rachel Evans, sharing the details of the cottage and Sophie's outdated brace. Rachel frowned, pulling up regulations on her computer. "This sounds serious, Clara. We need to involve social services, but we have to tread carefully. Sophie trusts you." Clara nodded, reluctant to risk Sophie's fragile trust, but knowing action was necessary. During lunch, she overheard Mrs. Larson, a parent volunteer with a sharp tongue, whispering to another parent about a neglected girl in rags after glimpsing Sophie's patched skirt. Clara intercepted her. "Mrs. Larson, Sophie's situation is delicate. We're handling it." Mrs. Larson's eyes narrowed. "That child's living in squalor, and you're just handling it. I'm on the school board. I'll raise this at the next meeting." Clara's pulse quickened. Mrs. Larson's well-meaning outrage could escalate things too fast, potentially separating Sophie from Margaret. That afternoon, Clara introduced a journaling prompt about dreams for the future. Sophie wrote a short tale about a seagull searching for her lost flock, her words simple but poignant. She flew over the ocean looking for her family even when her wings hurt. Clara read it privately, her throat tightening at the parallel to Sophie's life. After school, she drove back to Seaview Lane, hoping to speak with Margaret again, but found the cottage empty, a note pinned to the door. "At clinic, back soon." Clara's mind raced. Had something happened to Sophie or Margaret? She called Rachel, who confirmed social services had been notified and would visit the cottage soon. Clara returned home, the storm's aftershock still rumbling in the distance, her thoughts consumed by Sophie's drawing of the lonely bus stop and the reality of a child waiting in the rain for a life that might never arrive. The sun broke through the clouds over Willow Creek, casting a pale light on Willow Creek Elementary as Clara Thompson prepared her classroom, her mind heavy with the image of Sophie Miller's rain-soaked figure at the bus stop and the stark reality of her seaside cottage. That afternoon, a man appeared at the school office, his weathered jacket smelling faintly of fish and salt, his face lined with fatigue but eyes sharp with purpose. Daniel Miller introduced himself as Sophie's father, claiming he'd returned after securing a steady job on a commercial fishing vessel in Port Haven, 30 miles south. He presented a crumpled lease for a small apartment and a pay stub, his voice earnest but strained. "I've been gone too long, I know, but I'm here to make it right for Sophie and Margaret." Clara, summoned to the office, studied him, noting the resemblance to Sophie in his thoughtful gaze, but her heart remained guarded, recalling Sophie's quiet resignation about her father's absences. Principal Bennett, a pragmatic man with a clipboard always in hand, verified Daniel's documents but insisted on a supervised meeting with Sophie. In the classroom, Sophie was finishing a math worksheet, her new journal open beside her, a fresh sketch of a seagull soaring above a calm sea. Clara approached gently. "Sophie, someone's here to see you. It's your dad." Sophie's pencil froze, her face a mix of hope and wariness, her small hands gripping the journal tightly. In the counselor's office, Daniel knelt to Sophie's, level, his voice thick. "Sophie, I'm back. I've got a place for us, a real home." Sophie's eyes searched his, her voice barely above a whisper. "You always say you'll come back." The words hung heavy, and Clara felt the weight of years of broken promises. Rachel Evans, the counselor, suggested a meeting with Margaret to discuss next steps, but before they could arrange it, Mrs. Larson, the parent volunteer, burst in, her face flushed with indignation. "This is the father who left that child in a shack. The board needs to know. Sophie can't stay in those conditions." Clara stepped forward, her tone firm. "Mrs. Larson, Sophie's with her grandmother, who loves her deeply. We're working on solutions." Mrs. Larson's eyes narrowed. "Love doesn't fix a leaking roof or an empty pantry. I'll push for emergency placement if I have to." Principal Bennett raised a hand. "We'll follow protocol, but this is a family matter. Let's include Margaret." At the cottage that evening, Clara, Rachel, and Daniel arrived to find Margaret stoking the wood stove, her cane propped nearby, Sophie sorting a small pile of clothes. The air was tense as Daniel explained his return, showing Margaret the lease and job contract. "It's a 2-bedroom place near a clinic for Sophie's leg," he said. Margaret's face remained unreadable, her hands steady but eyes sharp. "You've made promises before, Daniel. After Emily died, you vanished into your grief, leaving us to scrape by." Sophie, sitting quietly, opened her journal and began reading aloud a new story about a seagull who finds her flock, but hesitates to join them, afraid they'll fly away again. Her voice, clear and steady, silenced the room, her words a mirror to her own fears. The seagull wanted to believe they'd stay, but she'd seen too many storms. Clara's throat tightened, and even Mrs. Larson, who'd followed uninvited, softened, her earlier zeal giving way to quiet reflection. Daniel's face crumpled, guilt evident. "Sophie, I wasn't strong enough before, but I'm trying now." Sophie closed her journal, her expression unyielding. "Trying isn't the same as staying." Rachel proposed a plan. Social services would assess the cottage's safety while Daniel prepared the apartment. Clara added, "Sophie's doing well in school. Stability matters most for her now." Margaret nodded slowly. "She deserves better than this place, but I won't let her go without me." Mrs. Larson, shifting uncomfortably, spoke up. "I misjudged. I'll talk to the board about support, not separation." The meeting ended with an agreement to visit the Port Haven apartment the next day, but Sophie's gaze remained fixed on her father, searching for proof beyond words. As they left, Clara noticed Sophie clutch her journal tighter, as if it held the courage she needed to face this uncertain reunion. Back at school, Clara watched Sophie during a reading session, her focus wavering, her eyes darting to the door as if expecting Daniel to disappear again. Rachel pulled Clara aside, confirming social services had found the cottage unsafe, but would prioritize keeping Sophie with Margaret. "Daniel's job checks out," Rachel said. "But his history worries me. Sophie's been let down too many times." Clara nodded, her resolve strengthening. She'd be Sophie's advocate, ensuring this chance at a family wasn't squandered. That night, Clara lay awake, the ocean's distant roar echoing Sophie's story of the seagull, a child caught between hope and doubt, her small voice demanding to be heard in a world that had too often let her down. The morning sun filtered through the windows of the Willow Creek Community Center, where Sophie Miller and her grandmother Margaret had been temporarily relocated after the cottage was deemed unsafe, its walls now a memory of their precarious past. Clara Thompson arrived early, carrying a bag of school supplies donated by parents, her heart lifted by the sight of Sophie sitting at a small table, her journal open to a new sketch of a seagull landing on a sturdy dock. The center's guest room was modest but warm, with clean linens and a heater humming softly, a stark contrast to the drafty cottage. Sophie's new aluminum leg brace, provided by a local clinic after Daniel's insurance kicked in, gleamed. As she moved, its padded grips easing her steps. Clara set the supplies down, smiling. "These are for you, Sophie. Ready for school?" Sophie nodded, her eyes brighter but still cautious, as if testing the stability of this new chapter. Margaret, looking stronger after starting arthritis medication, sipped tea from a proper mug, her cane resting against a chair. "This place is a blessing," she said, her voice softer than before. "But Sophie's been asking about the apartment. In Port Haven." Clara knelt beside Sophie. "Your dad's working on it. Want to tell me about your new drawing?" Sophie traced the dock's lines. "It's where the seagull rests after flying a long way. She's not sure if it's home yet." The words carried a quiet hope, tempered by years of waiting. At school, Sophie rejoined Clara's class, her new brace making hallways easier to navigate. Emma Carter, her classmate, greeted her with a grin, slipping a colored pencil into Sophie's hand. "For your seagull drawings," Emma said, sparking a rare smile from Sophie. Clara introduced a talent show project, encouraging students to share a skill or story. Sophie hesitated, then signed up to read a seagull tale, her journal now a constant companion. After school, Clara drove Sophie and Margaret to Port Haven to see Daniel's apartment, a modest two-bedroom unit in a brick building with a ramp and an elevator. Daniel met them at the door, his hands calloused from fishing work, his eyes nervous but warm. "It's not fancy, but it's ours," he said, showing them a small living room with second-hand furniture and a window overlooking a quiet street. Sophie explored slowly, her brace clicking softly, pausing at a bedroom with a new desk and a shelf of books. Margaret ran her fingers along the clean walls, her expression softening but guarded. "It's a start," she said. Back at the community center, Mrs. Larson, the parent volunteer, organized a fundraiser delivering clothes, toiletries, and a new backpack for Sophie. Her earlier judgment had transformed into action, and she handed Sophie a sketchbook. "For your stories," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Sophie accepted it, her fingers lingering on the cover. At school, Sophie threw herself into preparing her talent show story, revising her seagull tale with Clara's guidance. During a rehearsal, she read a line about the seagull finding a flock that stayed through a storm, her voice steady, but eyes searching Clara's for reassurance. "It's beautiful, Sophie," Clara said. "You're ready." Meanwhile, Daniel attended weekly counseling sessions, sharing updates with Clara about his sobriety and job stability. "I'm learning to face things, not run," he told her during a school visit. Clara nodded, noting his effort but mindful of Sophie's need for consistency. Margaret, too, was changing, attending a senior group at the center, her laughter a new sound Sophie marveled at. A week before the talent show, Sophie visited the Port Haven clinic for a full orthopedic evaluation. The doctor, a kind woman named Dr. Patel, explained that with custom braces and physical therapy, Sophie could walk with less support within a year. Sophie listened quietly, then asked, "Will it hurt less?" Dr. Patel's gentle nod brought a flicker of relief to her face. At school, Sophie's friendship with Emma grew, the two girls sharing lunch and giggling over a game of drawing seagulls with silly hats. Clara watched, her heart full, seeing Sophie open up, her guarded walls lowering. The fundraiser brought more support. School families donated winter clothes and a gift card for groceries, easing Margaret's quiet worries. One evening, Clara found Sophie practicing her story at the community centre, her voice carrying a new confidence. The seagull learned the dock wasn't just a place to land. It was where her flock waited, Sophie read, glancing at Margaret, who nodded proudly. Daniel arrived later, bringing a small wooden seagull carved by a co-worker. "For your show," he said, handing it to Sophie. She held it carefully, her eyes searching his. "Will you be there?" she asked. Daniel met her gaze. "I'll be there, Sophie, no matter what." The night before the show, Clara helped Sophie rehearse, her story now polished, its ending hopeful yet honest about the seagull's lingering doubts. "Do you think they'll like it?" Sophie asked, her fingers tracing the wooden seagull. Clara smiled. "They'll love it because it's yours." The talent show loomed, and Clara sensed Sophie's nerves, her eyes often drifting to the community centre's door, as if testing Daniel's promise. Margaret, now moving with less pain, helped Sophie choose a new sweater for the performance, its soft blue brightening her face. As the event approached, Clara coordinated with Rachel to ensure Sophie's educational needs would follow her, whether she stayed at Willow Creek or transferred to Port Haven. The community's support, sparked by Sophie's quiet strength, had woven a safety net, but Clara knew the true test was Daniel's commitment. Would he stay through the inevitable challenges? Sophie's story, her seagull's journey, was a mirror to her own, and Clara prayed the ending would reflect the home Sophie deserved. The morning of Willow Creek Elementary's talent show dawned, crisp and clear, the coastal air sharp with the promise of winter, as families gathered in the auditorium, their chatter mingling with the scent of pine from a decorated stage. Sophie Miller, now settled in the Port Haven apartment with her grandmother Margaret and father Daniel, stood backstage, her new blue sweater vibrant against her aluminum brace, her journal clutched tightly, its pages filled with the seagull story she'd share today. Clara Thompson, watching from the wings, noted Sophie's calm focus, a stark contrast to the guarded girl who'd arrived months ago. The apartment, with its sturdy walls and elevator, had become a haven, and Sophie's physical therapy sessions were easing her steps, her brace no longer leaving red marks. Margaret sat in the front row, her new sweater neat, her arthritis medication softening the lines of pain in her face, her eyes bright with pride. Daniel's seat beside her was reserved, a small test of his promise to be there. Sophie adjusted the wooden seagull tucked in her pocket, a gift from Daniel, her fingers tracing its smooth edges as she peeked through the curtain. The auditorium buzzed with anticipation, students practicing lines and parents snapping photos. Emma Carter, Sophie's friend, waved from the crowd, her matching colored pencil tucked behind her ear, a silent cheer. Clara knelt beside Sophie. "Ready to share your story?" Sophie nodded, her voice steady. "It's for Grandma and Dad. I want them to hear it." The show began with songs and skits, each act met with warm applause, but Sophie's eyes kept drifting to Daniel's empty seat, her calm wavering. Clara whispered, "You're enough, Sophie. Your story matters." As Emma finished a lively dance routine, Sophie's turn arrived. Principal Bennett took the stage, his voice warm. "Next, we have Sophie Miller, sharing her original story, The Seagull's Home." Sophie stepped forward, her brace clicking softly, and positioned herself at the microphone, which Clara adjusted. She opened her journal, took a deep breath and began. There was a seagull with a crooked wing who lived on a rocky shore with her grandmother, who knew every tide. Her voice, clear and strong, drew the audience in, the room falling silent. She described the seagull's search for her flock, her struggles through storms, and her fear of trusting those who might leave again. Halfway through, the auditorium, Dr. creaked, and Daniel slipped in, his fishing jacket rumpled, his face flushed from rushing. He slid into his seat beside Margaret, who gave a small nod. Sophie's eyes found him, her voice catching briefly before growing stronger. The seagull found a dock where other birds gathered, but she wondered if they'd stay. The story's heart lay in the seagull's choice to trust, to build a home despite her fears, and Sophie's words carried a quiet power, reflecting her own journey. As she read the final line, the seagull learned home wasn't just a place, but the flock who stayed. The audience erupted in applause, Margaret wiping tears, Daniel's face a mix of awe and regret. Sophie stepped off stage, her brace steady, and Clara hugged her. "You were incredible." Later, at the apartment, the three generations gathered in the small living room, a lamp casting a warm glow over new furniture. Sophie set her journal on the table, opening to a blank page. "I want to write a new story," she said, her voice firm. "About us, not seagulls. But I need to know it'll end well." Margaret, in a comfortable armchair, smiled softly. "It's already better, Sophie. We're together." Daniel, sitting across from her, leaned forward. "I'm here, Sophie, not just today, but every day." Sophie studied him, then nodded, picking up a pen. That weekend, Sophie planted a small herb garden on the apartment's balcony, her hands patting soil around basil and mint, mirroring her story's dock where the seagull found rest. Clara visited, bringing a journal from the school, and watched Sophie water the plants, her brace gleaming in the sunlight. "It's like a new nest," Sophie said, her eyes bright. Margaret joined them, her cane replaced by a lighter one, her face relaxed. "She's writing again," she told Clara. "Stories about growing things." Daniel, home from work, showed Sophie a schedule for her therapy, his voice steady. "We'll go together, and I'm signing up for night classes to learn bookkeeping, better hours." Sophie's smile was small but real, a sign of trust budding like her herbs. At school, Sophie's story was printed in the newsletter, and Emma suggested they draw a mural together, seagulls soaring over a dock. Clara watched their laughter, her heart full, knowing Sophie's world was expanding. Margaret joined a book club at the senior centre, her stories of the coast captivating her new friends. One evening, Sophie showed Clara a new journal entry, a tale of a family building a garden, each plant a step toward staying. "It's not finished," Sophie said, "but I think it'll be good." Clara nodded, seeing the strength in Sophie's words, a child no longer waiting but creating. The apartment, once a hope, was now a home, its walls holding their shared efforts. Sophie's question from her first day about fathers leaving had found an answer in Daniel's daily presence, his quiet actions louder than promises. As Clara left, Sophie waved from the balcony, her garden thriving, her journal open to a future she was writing herself.